my gut keeps saying, it won't shut up. It's like it's had 1,000 probiotics, and it's like, Chelsea, take Washington in the points. They're getting 4.5 again. What are the books doing? It feels like a Washington team that's been undervalued all season long. And sometimes we'll see this for Pac-12 teams because nobody sees their games. They're playing late at night. They don't play in the conference where it just means more. Or they have the two top-notch schools like Michigan and Ohio State. So it does feel like this is a Washington team that is still flying under the radar. This line opened at 6 during the game that Washington was playing against Texas, and swiftly went down to 4.5 with some Washington money coming in. It should be noted 6 is a different number than 4.5. So if those professional bettors like 6, does not mean necessarily that they like 4.5. But still, I am having trouble going against my gut here. Jenks, I know you like Michigan, and I will say, if Washington can put up over 400 yards of passing and still almost lose a game, I think that is your sabotage factor. Because as good as Michael Penix Jr. and those receivers were against Texas, it came down to the final play. So it feels like that passing game couldn't play any better, and they still almost lost that game. Then you look at Michigan, who played, I'm not going to say they played terrible, but they had plenty of mindless mistakes on the special teams, even like the first series with J.J. McCarthy almost throwing a pick. It was called back, but still, it felt like a game where Michigan could have played a lot better. Washington played out of their mind, still barely won. So make the case for Michigan here, because I know you do like the Wolverines.
Texas, even though Texas never led in the Sugar Bowl, which is crazy to think about, Texas could have won that game at the very end, as we saw. They could have won on the final play of the game. Never led in the game, but they were able to stay in it because the Washington defense and the Washington secondary just isn't that good. So what will Michigan do? Michigan will take advantage of the Washington secondary. Michigan will make enough stops on defense, I think, to cover this number. The thing about Michigan is they're just not sexy at all. They're not exciting. They line up and they just bowl you over. When you look at Washington, you say, oh my God, these receivers, Michael Penix, and all of those things are true. When you look at Michigan, what do you see? You see old khaki pants on the sideline. You think, he's a cheater. And then they just run the ball. Blake Corum over the left tackle. J.J. McCarthy making some passes. They blitz you. But it's not necessarily an exciting jump off the page brand of football. And so people tend to lean to the other side. I think Michigan is the best team in the country. I've said that for weeks, and I think they cover this number.
Well, the main case against Washington is they had over 400 yards of passing in that game against Texas and nearly lost the game. I think that's your sabotage factor. The fact that Michael Penix Jr. had an amazing game, but yet it came down to the final play, and again, they almost lost the game. So even if Michael Penix Jr. has a good performance here, which this line is kind of suggesting that maybe he doesn't, we're seeing a lower total here at 55.5. I think that's what kind of makes me a little bit nervous. But also, I feel like Michael Penix Jr. is on a different level than Jalen Milroe. I think he's a much better passer. Because isn't that, I'm not going to say it's the knock on Jalen Milroe, but I feel like he is somebody that kind of panics and runs first. Like, maybe panic is a little bit too strong of a connotation, but you kind of get what I'm saying. Because I do think there's going to be much more pressure on Michael Penix Jr. in this game. Obviously, you've got to get a hand in his face. You've got to do something to disrupt the rhythm that we saw against Texas. And like you said, we knew the weakness of Texas was their secondary. So maybe it's not the case for Michigan here. But I don't know. Sometimes we see a team like this that the market undervalues the entire season, and now they're getting 4.5 points because there is a chance that they lose this game and still cover this number, especially when points are somewhat at a premium at 55.5. When you saw this total, what was your first instinct? Because I feel like this total is kind of correlated to Michigan and their defense and their run game. If you think Michigan kind of rules the roost here and controls the tempo, feels like an under game. If you think that Washington can sneak a few by, this Michigan secondary, feels like maybe an over game. Do you have a feeling? Do you think it is an under game since you like Michigan?
Yeah, I do. I think Michigan is better at the line of scrimmage, particularly on the defensive line. I think they're going to get pressure on Michael Penix, and you're absolutely right. Jalen Milroe is not nearly as good of a passer as Michael Penix, but Jalen Milroe also presents a huge problem with his legs. Michael Penix does not. Penix can run, but he's not a running quarterback. So what you want to do with Jalen Milroe is you want to contain him and keep him from getting out of the pocket. With Michael Penix, you want to disrupt his timing. And so Texas was never really able to do that. Michigan will be able to do that. And here's the thing. Michael Penix is going to get his. Those NFL receivers, Dunze and those guys, they will get theirs. There's no question about it. But all Michigan has to do is get some critical stops, because I don't think Washington is going to be able to stop Michigan. And Michigan has the dogs on defense to get a handful of stops. If Texas could get a stop or two, one stop or two, maybe they win that game, and they just couldn't do it. I think Michigan will be able to. And again, I just keep going back to the fact that everyone keeps saying the book on Michigan all year long is, well, this is really a team that hasn't played anyone. Michigan has not lost a game all season, and they have won every single game this season by at least 6 points or more. So they won by a touchdown or more in each and every single game this season. I'm just big on the Wolverines just because they have not gotten credit up to this point. And you look at Washington, and I'm like, oh my God, Washington plus 4.5, Washington plus 4.5. I feel like Vegas is begging you to take that line, and I do think it's the Wolverines.
David's all in on Washington. Jenks is all in on Michigan, and I'm somewhere in between. Where do you fall when it comes to the national title game?
My heart wants to find reasons to believe that Michael Penix Jr. can go out with a bang and drag the Huskies to a national title, because I've been on them since the beginning of the year, and I'd like to believe that can happen because I'm a Big Ten guy, and I have a hard time sort of choking down the idea of a Jim Harbaugh national title. But I think when you look at the way things stack up, the way they played against Alabama was very indicative of how powerful this defense can be, how it can take over a game. And I think you did get one of those games where J.J. McCarthy was asked to be a part of a big comeback and helped key it. And I hadn't seen that yet this year against a quality opponent, and he did it. And so I do think that I'm leaning Michigan right now. I continue to search the universe far and wide for reasons to swing me back in Washington's direction. But I do think, when you saw what Washington's defense did to Jalen Milroe and Alabama, I think it's hard to, unless Washington gets a couple of big plays early, which is always a possibility, right, with the Dunze and Polk out there, unless they get a couple of big plays early and really run away and hide, I don't think, if this is a back and forth affair, as most of us, I think, expect it will be, it's going to end up being Michigan in the end.
All right, let's really quickly go on to the Eagles at plus 550 to win the NFC. But the Eagles have been looking a completely different team than in the past couple weeks. So, do you trust the Eagles to even make it out of the first round of the playoffs, Chelsea?
Ooh, I'm not sure if trust is the right word to use for the Eagles. There's still a good team in there somewhere. And I think you have to remember, playing against the Cardinals, Kyler Murray is not your run-of-the-mill, bottom-of-the-barrel team quarterback. At one point, Kyler Murray was in the conversation for MVP. Yes, this was a real thing that happened a couple years ago. And you've also got to remember who the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals is. Jonathan Gannon, who has ties to Philadelphia. Maybe he knew a little bit what was coming there. So maybe you throw that one out a bit. I don't think they're in the circle of trust, but maybe not as bad as people are expecting.
I disagree. And I don't think Kyler Murray is a good quarterback. I think he used to be a decent quarterback at one time. Now he's mediocre at best. You know what? I won't even say distrust. I'll take it old school. Remember this? Oh, the old poop emoji. That's what I think about the Eagles. The Eagles don't even trust the Eagles. They're a mess right now. The Eagles right now are just a group of guys who have no identity whatsoever, and they're falling apart at the wrong time. No trust for those guys.
Oh, the poop emoji? We need to send
Yeah.
that to the Eagles fans. Can't wait to get them on you.